What's going on, everybody? Welcome into this episode of The Breakdown. I am your host, Danny Meringue. First of all, big thank you to everybody who subbed, followed, left a comment, left feedback, been engaging with the community that I'm trying to grow here. It's been awesome. Thank you all so much. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button and help me grow what I've got going here. Today, it's going to be a preview with a few weeks to go before the new league year of free agency. I'm going to do this in a 5-part series. Point guards, guards, wings, and then bigs. It's not so much point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center anymore. It's just positional evolution. Although point guards is still kind of a niche deal. I'm going to be a little bit on each side as it pertains to some of the guys here. It really depends on which way the Blazers decide they're going to go. They could go with a little more offense. They could go with a little more playmaking. They could take a flyer on somebody. They go for a little more defense. It's kind of ubiquitous which way they're going to end up going, and I left it a little bit open-ended to kind of pursue that. So without further ado, let's dive into the 5 names that I've got here. We'll take each one as they come. All right, so don't kill the messenger, but the first guy I'm going to bring out here is not really a point guard and somebody who made the Blazers look really awful in the first round of playoffs, and that's Austin Rivers. Kind of miscast coming into the NBA as maybe more than he was supposed to be. He came out for the Denver Nuggets and proved that he can deliver on the big stage as a shot maker, as a secondary creator, and somebody really you can just rely on. That's something the Blazers probably need a lot more of. When you take a look at his production as it pertained to Denver Nuggets and not just big-time moments with Jamal Murray out, he just kind of is what he is at this point. And he's a shot creator. He's got good, positive creation value one-on-one. He's got good size. He's 6'4". He's got an 8'1" reach. He's got decent athleticism, I think is the best way to categorize that. It's nothing that's going to shock you or blow you away. I mean, granted, he did straight line drive the Blazers more times than I care to count, but he's got some tools. He's a positive finisher in and around the rim. He's not going to blow you away, but he's very solid in that regard and has been throughout most of his career. As a creator, he's better at creating his own shots than he is for others, but he does find the way to create passing lanes for others, particularly off the bounce, and just has a solid basketball IQ. I mean, it's still Doc Rivers' kid. Like, he understands the game. The probably biggest boon that you're looking at for the Blazers is that he's a multi-positional defender because, again, that size, 6'4", 8'1" reach, and we saw he was effective on both Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. He's got good size. He's got good instincts, and in that regard, that's something the Blazers could use more of. And I said I'm going to break my rule right out of the gate with Rivers because he's not really a point guard. He's just more of a combo guard. But if the Blazers are going to take a look at doing some things differently next season, do they need to have all the creation burden on one player? Do they want a guy who really sits the table, your bench Chris Paul? Or do they want enough guys that move the ball around and try to understand the flow of the game? You look at the LA Clippers, where Chauncey Billups came from. Yes, they have traditional point guards, but they kind of moved away from that come playoff time, and the ball movement was still nice because you had multiple creation aspects throughout the lineup. And I think Austin Rivers is a guy that could kind of grease that. Oh, and by the way, he was linked to the Blazers in 2016 with Neil Olshey. There you go. That's the one you're really looking for. Because listen, Neil Olshey, if nothing else, always gets his man. So that's one person to think about for the Blazers free agency to kind of slot into that, not necessarily point guard spot, but guard spot as the Blazers look to retool and rebuild their bench. All right, let's get to the kind of the meat of the point guard section, the more point guardy folks, and honestly, people I would expect the Blazers to be linked with as we approach free agency. And the first one is ELFRID PAYTON. Didn't end all too well in New York. A lot of rumblings about playing time and how little he got of it during the playoffs. You can kind of split hairs on it. He's a non-shooter. It's one of those things that you kind of have to deal with. But I also thought he played pretty well for the Knicks this season. The Knicks are kind of a fun story. I think there's a little bit of hashtag Tibbs solved everything as opposed to, the young guys got better. And they have a bunch of young athletic dudes who are pretty talented. I think ELFRID PAYTON is one of those guys where he's not like this player that you have to have, but he's a good player to have. He has his warts, he has his flaws, but he's a solid guy to have run your team. He's a top-level playmaker. He can create with either hand off the bounce. He can get downhill, plus finisher. Non-existent as a shooter. I mean, it's just not. That's not his bag. when he came into the league, the duo of him and Victor Oladipo in Orlando were one of the duos that most bothered Damian Lillard. I mean, they hounded him. They've got good length. He's 6'3", 8'2", reach. Pretty damn good size, strong kid. I say kid, he's 27 now. It's just kind of weird that it's been in the league that long. But he, outside of Tony Allen and Mike Conley, this was the duo that really bothered Dame, and that in any team Chris Paul was on. That was kind of how it worked. Some of Dame's worst matchups came against Payton. He's just one of those guys that has done really well. He's a solid point of attack defender. He's not a great team defender, can fall asleep on the backside, but all in all, solid addition. If you could get him for, if you get him for vet man, you're thrilled. If you BAE, you're kind of probably getting a little too far, but if you could split the difference, I think you're probably cooking with gas at that point in time. He's functional. And I think if you're looking for somebody who's less on the shot creation side and go get their own offense and more about kind of running your second unit, that's probably more along the lines of what you're looking at. All right, so the next guy on the list may or may not be somebody you're entirely familiar with, but he's somebody that's, to be honest, the guy I think is most likely to end up on the Blazers just based on precedence. He's been glossed over. He's been a third or fourth guard. He's offense first. Now, again, we're looking at the tenure of Stotts and Olshey. This is now Billups and Olshey. Maybe that changes, but I'm going on precedent in history. And in that regard, if you watched the Washington Wizards much this year, you saw RAUL and NETO play really well. Neto was a guy, I think, who outperformed his pretty much every expectation. As a third guard, fourth guard, whatever you want to call him, he slotted in very nicely as a spot-up shooter, was able to work in the catch and shoot, off the dribble. He's just a plus shooter overall, which, again, Portland shooting, it's kind of what you associate. He's a guy who I think can run a second unit, maybe not entirely by himself, but well enough. It's hard to delineate those two things because of how Washington ran things, which is essentially Russ and Beal with the ball in their hands 99% of the time. Now, Neto's not a premier passer, but I'd call him a plus passer. Can create with either hand, off the bounce, coming off DHOs, working in pick and roll. He can do a little bit of everything, which, if you're talking about Portland retooling their bench, I think that's probably the aim of what they're trying to find. He does fly in the face of making changes to the backcourt that would include size or defense, so maybe that's where the pushback comes from. He is 6 foot tall. He does have a sub 8 foot reach. Not an elite athlete, but he does have a pretty damn decent defensive basketball IQ. He is able to read passing lanes relatively well. How well that will translate into Portland, whether or not they play aggressive, whether they play conservative, maybe they're active in more passing lanes, I don't know how useful that is going to be. But overall, if you're looking for a vet min point guard who's definitely above the break glass in case of emergency, like if he's a part of your rotation, that's fine. And that's what I think Portland is striving for. They're looking for more guys that they can trust within the rotation, where they're 8, 9, 10, even 11 man is not something where, due to youth, injury, trust, any of those things, they're precluded from really diving in and playing those guys. And I think that depth is really something that Portland needs to focus, especially if there's any truth to this idea that they're going to potentially run it back, which is terrifying in and of itself. But even if they don't, I still think they need to look at more players like this where, yeah, they're vet minimum guys, but they fit and plug very specific needs that the Blazers have in a more creative manner than such an entirely siloed player that we'll get to kind of at the end of this group. RAUL NETO overall, solid fit, but we'll see what happens as far as which way Portland and really Chauncey Billups decides to go with that bench unit, but he's somebody I can see slotting in there pretty easily. All right, this next guy is easily the best player of the group. There's really no doubt about that. The fit would make a ton of sense. His skill level is the highest across the board, and he would do well fitting alongside Portland starters or bench units. It's CJ McCollum of the Indiana Pacers, or formerly of the Indiana Pacers, as he's now an unrestricted free agent. And in that regard, he's going to be sought after. Now, I have talked to people in Indiana who seem to believe there's mutual interest in bringing TJ McConnell back and TJ McConnell wanting to come back. It's not going to be MLE money. It's going to be less than that. But I still think it's probably going to creep above that TPMLE or be right at that line. he knows his role with the Pacers. There's mutual love and respect, and I think that there's something to be said in that regard. He's kind of cut his teeth there, right? But McConnell is a guy I think the Blazers should definitely be taking a look at. Like I said, he's the best playmaker of the bunch. There's no doubt about it. Portland's guard core, especially if you're talking about running it back with Dame and CJ, need defensive help. McConnell is a point-of-attack monster. He's Clamp City. He will be that guy. For 6'1", he is a defensive stud, and it's actually pretty impressive for what he can do. His defensive IQ is off the charts. He plays passing lanes incredibly well. Dribblers have to be careful. If you watch tape of him, you often see primary initiators turning their back to him because he's just that much of a hound. He's the dude that people think Patrick Beverley is. Let's put it that way, defensively. He's that guy. He does struggle on the offensive side of the floor, particularly on the perimeter. However, that's pretty much the only area. He's a plus mid-range shooter. He's a plus finisher, especially for his size, around the rim, and is able to get downhill and get others involved pretty easily and pretty evenly. McConnell is a guy who... he's your throwback, right? He can get to that mid-range to create his shot. He's Chris Paul-esque without the three-point shot. He's pesky. He's probably dirty. He's irritating. His motor is always up there. He's always yapping. He's always getting after you. And I think the Blazers could do with somebody like that, especially as a primary ball handler. Norm, zip, that man is quiet. He's angry and locked in. CJ has kind of like this laid-back trash talk. Dame waits till the end of the game and just lets his game do the talking. McConnell's a guard version of Nurkic, a pest and irritant, and I think they'd be well served to pursue him. Likelihood of it happening, probably pretty small, but I put him on the list because I think that's probably the apex of what you're hoping to get in the offseason at that position. I don't necessarily believe they have the assets, the cash base to make it happen, but I've seen weirder things that I would be really, really, really impressed if they were able to land him in that regard. So TJ McConnell, definitely a name I would love to see added. Likelihood, probably a 2 out of 10, and maybe even that stretching it. But again, we've seen weirder things. 3, 2. All right, so the last guy on the list, it's going to be a Neil Olshey special, which means you're diving in the bargain bins and you're hoping to find something. You're trying to find that gem. Alongside the Harry Giles and Mo Harklesses and Al-Farouq Aminu and Robin Lopez, the guys that he's kind of sorted through and sifted through and hoping to find something to shake free, Dante Exum fits that mold. He's had an injury history riddled throughout his career, but he does have... a hell of a skill set to work with and a platform more so than anything else. He's got incredible size, great length, wingspan, athleticism, reach. He's a big-bodied guard who can be multi-positional, can realistically cover 1 through 3 and can slide up to even 4s because of his strength. But I think if you're looking for somebody to fit that mold, he's not going to be your backup point guard. But he could be your backup, or he could be your positional guy who, if you need to pull somebody off the bench, if you're talking about Chauncey Billups again, integrating more defensive aspects, this is the kind of flyer that you probably expect the Blazers to take. Again, the injury history is scary, but he can create for others in a sense. He's got a plus creation tools. The shooting is a major problem. It's non-existent. He is an okay finisher at the rim. How healthy is he going to be is a question, but we're talking about 11 to 15 or even 17 when you get to the deeper rosters and two-way deals. These are the kind of things that you're hoping the Blazers go to look for, and maybe they strike gold. The thing about Dante is he's just kind of fallen out of favor because of injury. He could still be a contributor to a team if he stays healthy. That needs just listen to him talk. It's hard not to like the guy.
Fry sauce? Have you tried fry sauce yet? Fry sauce or ketchup?
Tomato sauce.
All right, so that's your list. You've got Austin Rivers, you've got Elfrid Payton, RAUL Neto, TJ McConnell, and Dante Exum. You're running the board, different levels, different styles, different sizes, and well, different viability for the Portland roster, but there's a string that you can draw through all of them. You can say, well, this guy's a Bartlestein client. This guy has been connected to Neil Olshey in the past. This fits a pattern of what the Blazers have gone after. And I think to varying degrees, these guys all fit those. There are other guys out there. This list was actually a lot broader. These are the 5 that really kind of came to the top for me and not necessarily were the best fit or the ones that I wanted the most. It just started ticking enough boxes. So I'm going to be doing this across all positions. We got the big guards coming up next, then the wings, then the big-bodied wings, wings and then the bigs over the next couple weeks as we get into draft season, into free agency, and see how this Portland Trailblazers team is constructed. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I do really appreciate it. And again, please subscribe, like, rate, review, comments, whether you're listening on the podcast form, you listen or watching here on YouTube. I really appreciate you. And until next time, we'll take care. Bye.